There once was a young Count from Barry who didn't know who he would marry. Honest Roxana or fickle Diana? Well, he finally settled with Airy. Have you ever played a game that made you say, "Where have you been all my life?" That's what Crusader Kings 3 was like for me. If you've watched House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones before, this game feels a lot like that. What with the questions of succession, the intrigue, the war, and the incest. Definitely can't forget the incest. Crusader Kings lets you assume the role of a ruler in the medieval world as you marry, scheme, and war your way to the top. It's my first real grand strategy game, so I don't really have any direct comparisons personally, but for me, it's reminiscent of 4X games like Civ, but with a very different approach to very similar ideas. Is Crusader Kings 3 worth the price? Let's find out now. At its core, I see CK3 as a story creator more than anything. The main premise of the game is that you play as a ruler living in the medieval world. The game operates in real time, simulating life as time goes by. The game will follow the life of your character up until their death. Then, you continue the game as your heir and any subsequent descendants. Each character you play as will have unique personality traits and stats which dictate a number of different aspects of the game, such as how much people like you and how well you manage different aspects of your empire. Once your character becomes an adult, you'll be able to choose a lifestyle path, essentially your current life focus, which lets you go down different upgrade trees and unlock different boosts and abilities. One of the most important parts of the game is marriage, as it's a powerful political tool which allows you to create alliances and hopefully competent heirs. You'll be constantly marrying yourself off as well as your descendants and members of your court. Beware though, as is often the case, those closest to you will likely become some of your biggest competitors, so be smart about managing your alliances into the future. As a ruler, you will have a title to some land which you manage. In order to expand your lands, you will need to have a claim on those lands. Beware though, others may gain claims on your land and attempt to take you out. Because of titles and claims, succession is a huge part of the game. Upon your death, your heirs will split up your titles based on the law of the land. In most cultures, the land will be split evenly amongst your male children, at least until you get sweet primogeniture. This initial structure makes it so that you can't just build up too easily and snowball into a massive empire early. And so from a gameplay perspective, I do think it makes some sense. It can also be really exciting to see if you can conquer enough land to move up in tiers within your ruler's life so that the kingdom you worked so hard to build doesn't get split up by your children. However, I do find the system a little bit limiting. In general, getting to those later inheritance types doesn't really happen until pretty late in the game, but at least they do provide you some alternate structures, such as allowing dynasty members to vote. Even so, I think it would have been nice to have more say in which lands which child inherits though, as right now, the game kinda just assigns them for you, and this can be a little bit frustrating. I also wish we maybe had a bit more freedom with creating new custom kingdoms or empires. As of right now, doing so seems to be considerably more expensive, and I feel like the default kingdoms and empires can feel a little bit restrictive, as it sort of forces you to try and control certain areas. Thankfully, there are some alternate kingdoms which you can claim if you meet the requirements. What you'll come to realize though is that no matter how great a ruler you are, it's difficult to rule alone. In fact, the game actually penalizes you for directly holding more land than your character is actually able to manage. As such, you'll often need to delegate some lands to your vassals. In exchange, these vassals will manage those lands, pay you a tax, and provide levies to your army. Be careful though, these vassals can become powerful and will often expect seats on your council. Speaking of which, an important part of managing your domain is your council. Here you can appoint different people to become key figures in your state. They'll be able to help you with various tasks such as training your troops, fabricating claims on land for you, and spreading your culture to the common folk. You can fill these council positions with your vassals or your courtiers, who are people you can invite and quarter at your castle. Courtiers are important because not only can they help fill important roles, but they can also become knights in your army, and you can also use them for their claims or marriage potential. So, as you can tell, Crusader Kings is a lot about managing relationships. You'll need to manage your relationships with your family, those under you, and potentially those above you as well. Thankfully, there are a number of ways to manage your relationships. The main way would be through schemes, whereby you try to sway, seduce, or do other dastardly things to your rivals, such as kidnapping or murder. I do have to say though, I feel like sway schemes can maybe be a bit too easy, as you can sometimes manage to sway someone who, by all means, should hate you for eternity because you allegedly killed their whole family or something. I don't know, I had nothing to do with it. I suppose the rival system is supposed to help mimic this, but I do feel like that system could use some more depth. Maybe some sort of system to make people suspicious of others. Of course, if those don't work, you can always try to discover other people's secrets and blackmail them into doing whatever you want. Or you could just imprison and torture them. Again, I just want to emphasize how the game feels more like a storytelling platform more than anything else. This is further reinforced by the event system in the game, which will have random events pop up once in a while. As ruler, you need to make choices, some of which might require skill checks based on your stats. There are even cases where you might be faced with choices that go against your character's personality. Choosing to do so, even if it's the better choice for the realm, can cause your character to gain stress. If you're not careful with managing your stress, you might find yourself having mental breakdowns and slowly losing it. There can also be some hugely impactful events that can greatly change the political landscape, as well as some truly absurd events. I will say though, I do wish there were more events in general. I feel like it can start repeating fairly quickly, and once you recognize some of the events, you sort of know what options might be best or what might be coming up. And please, stop inviting me to so many feasts. It's Tuesday. I don't want to be drunk anymore. I think ultimately though, what I love so much about the CK gameplay is that it gives you so much freedom as a player. It doesn't give you any goal or win conditions like Civ, and instead just says, here you go. You live in this world, now go do whatever you want. Want to min-max your character and play map painting simulator? You can do it. Want to roleplay as characters including all their faults? Hell yeah, go for it. Want to bang all your vassals' wives and have your bastards take over their lands? That's like 3 clicks. Want to create an incestuous empire of superhuman warriors? I mean, why not? Throughout your games, crazy stuff will happen, and I think the potential for so many different stories is what makes the game so interesting. If anything, I wish there was more murder. Beyond the whole family drama aspect, you'll also need to manage an empire. Like any strategy game, there are a number of resources you'll need to manage. First, you have gold, which is without a doubt the most important resource and is necessary for a number of things such as building and maintenance. Next, you have prestige, which is built by your character doing great and rulerly things. Prestige is very useful as you use your royal authority to declare war and reform your culture. Next, you have piety, which I like to call God points. These allow you to petition your religious heads and even potentially create your own religion. Finally, you have renown, which is how well known your family is. Having family members of different levels across the world will increase prestige, and gaining points will allow you to disinherit those you seem unworthy, as well as upgrade your dynasty with special attributes that carry throughout the game. While on the one hand I do like the simplicity of the land management system, I do also wish there was more to it. As of right now, it can feel a bit snowbally, and I can't help but feel like the best thing to do in most cases is just to invest in more gold. Some more variety or depth in the buildings here would definitely be cool. There are some special duchy buildings, as well as buildings unique to certain territories, and this helps to provide variety, but again, I do think this could be an area of improvement for future expansions. Alright, so what about war? With your military, you have 3 types of units. First, you have levies, who are the commoners you rally when it's time for war. Then you have your men-at-arms, who are professional soldiers you have to spend quite a bit of gold to maintain. You can raise a certain number of men-at-arms regiments, and they can consist of different types of units, like horsemen, pikemen, and archers. All of these different unit types have their own unit counters and weaknesses. Finally, you have your knights, who are your superheroes, and will consist of your family, vassals, and courtiers. Each knight has an individual prowess score which shows how good they are at fighting. Once war is declared, both sides can raise their armies and call upon whatever allies they have. Then, you can start moving your armies around the map in real time. Keep in mind though, it does take some time for your armies to traverse into other tiles. I do wish we were more freely able to go back and forth between areas though, because right now, if you go too far, your army will have to do a full loop instead of just turning around and heading back. When armies finally meet each other, they then start fighting. Something to keep in mind is that in CK, you don't control the actual combat of battles, just the movement of armies, and honestly, I'd say the combat is most reminiscent of Risk, as battles go through a series of dice rolls. You can, however, influence battles with your unit composition, knights, commander, and the terrain. I like the combat, although I do wish there were more factors that could potentially impact things, or maybe just a little more oomph in general. I think maybe the inclusion of a more in-depth event system that only occurs during wartime would be a nice touch to make you feel more part of war and to have stories come alive during these wars. However, while I like the army movement part of the game in theory, because of how the AI operates, it can be a bit of a confusing experience. The AI really likes to avoid your armies if you have any sort of calculated advantage, and they'll do this to extreme lengths, sailing all over the place just to avoid you. Right now it just doesn't necessarily feel like the AI has any sort of plan, it just feels like it'll recalculate the best move to do based on whatever you just input. And this can be a bit of a mess at times. It's not particularly difficult, but I guess it's just a little bit annoying. I guess I might as well use this time to talk about the AI overall. While the AI can definitely surprise me sometimes with how devious they are, I do think there are some minor areas they can improve on. For example, I think they're quite bad at handling marriage and education of heirs, often marrying postmenopausal women, and hey, nothing wrong with that. But in the medieval world, it's a little weird. I just feel like in general, the stats of AI characters in other family lines of my dynasty are a bit lacking without the proper guidance. I think more competent AI would also help increase the challenge of the game, which I think could maybe use a bit more of a boost right now. Something I really like about Crusader Kings is how it takes a very macro lens at cultural aspects of the world, particularly with the clashing of cultures and faiths. I like how the game tries to simulate the merging and fracturing of cultures and faiths, and you'll find that both of these actually have pretty big impacts on how your empire might run. It's not perfect, but still, I think it's an enjoyable system. With the Royal Court expansion, you're now also able to visit and hold court, where you'll listen to vassals complain, and you can even pimp out your court with decorations from your conquests. I also just want to commend the devs on a job well done with the UI. I actually first tried to play Crusader Kings 2 back in the day, but had been scared off by the UI. Seriously, was this thing designed by a medieval peasant? While CK3 still has a lot to pick up, I think the in-game tutorial, UI design, and other videos they give you make the whole beginner experience a lot better compared to past games. Finally, I just want to add that while I did have complaints, keep in mind that there is a pretty robust modding community helping to address a number of the issues that I brought up before. There are even some who are working to create alternate fantasy worlds, including Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. Definitely cannot wait to play those. So, as you can probably tell, I really like Crusader Kings. It's a game that I can just lose hours into, and I love the twists and turns that come along with the ride. It can be a little slow paced at times, but if you're into history and war and all of that, I definitely recommend it. I'm giving the game a 3.5 out of 4. I think it's great, and I'm hoping with future expansions and updates it can change to a 4. But is Crusader Kings 3 worth it? At $50, I think the base game is pretty worth it. I feel like I'm barely that far into my CK journey and have sunk entire evenings into the game. Looking at some of the DLC and expansions though, it does seem a bit pricey. The Royal Court expansion at $30 is alright. I don't hate it, but also would probably suggest waiting for it to be $20 or less, as it only really adds the Royal Court part, and makes some changes to how culture works. It's definitely a cool addition though, and would probably be the DLC to buy at the time of this recording if you're on the stingier side. The rest of the DLC also seem pretty expensive for what they add. $13 for these flavor packs is a bit of an oof for me, especially since there are also similar mods available for download. Also, just something to note is that these prices are actually increased from the original prices, so there actually has been a little bit of controversy with how Paradox has handled the DLC pricing. But hey, that's just me. Let me know down below what you think. Have you tried Crusader Kings 3 and what'd you think of it? And of course, thank you so much if you made it this far. If you had a good time, please consider clicking some of those buttons, and as usual, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.
What are you doing, step bro?